Love That Remains, An Inquiry. Fifth Movement, Standing at the Gates, by Eagle Snake, July 10th, 2026. The morning of February 2nd, 2025, was Sunday, and the house was quiet. Only Nick and I were awake. Sunlight entered through the open curtains beside the hospital bed that had transformed the living room over the previous days. Most of the house was still asleep. His parents were in their room, and my nieces were upstairs with our newborn daughter. Nick had been trying to sit up when I woke up from the makeshift bed at his feet and rushed to help him. He lay on his left side because the drainage emerging from his back made every other position painful. As he extended his right arm toward me, I pulled gently, helping him leverage himself upright. The movement seemed impossibly difficult. A month earlier, he had been a strong man, and now the effort of sitting up required assistance. When he settled himself, he asked me to sit beside him, then took both of my hands into his. His skin felt rough against mine, cold, thickened by years of working the land. He held my hands quietly for a moment before looking directly into my eyes. The cancer had taken nearly everything. His face had become impossibly thin. The bones beneath his skin stood in sharp relief. His beautiful blue eyes seemed larger now, peering outward from a face no longer able to conceal the architecture beneath it. For what it felt like a very long moment, he simply looked at me. Then he closed his eyes and took a long, slow breath. Finally, with his eyes still closed, he said, "I am ready." My chest tightened, not in panic, not in grief, something far stranger. The room seemed to narrow around the words. No tears came. They did not even attempt to come. In their stead, I felt a strength rise inside me. Not from above, not from below, but from within, as though invisible rods had been deployed along my spine, holding me upright, steady, immovable, available. "Are you sure?" I asked. The question emerged almost casually, as though we were discussing the color of a car rather than the end of a life. He opened his eyes. "Yes." I nodded. The answer did not surprise me. Then he spoke the last words I ever expected to hear from him. "Would you be my doula?" For a moment, the room disappeared. I knew exactly what he was asking, and I knew exactly what it would require. The wife would have to step aside. The woman who loved him beyond measure would have to wait to enter the scene. The man I loved did not need a wife at that moment. He needed a doula. Someone willing to accompany him to the edge. Someone willing to lend strength when his bound body no longer could. Someone willing to walk beside him for as long as the path remained shared. "Yes," I solemnly replied, understanding what was being asked of me. He nodded. Then, with the same quiet certainty that had marked the entire conversation, he said, "Assemble the family. I will announce it to them." That evening we held a ceremony. Not one intended to help him fight. We had held many of those before. This one was different. This one was intended to help him meet what was coming. And just after midnight, the ceremony ended. One by one, everyone drifted upstairs, and the house grew quiet again. Lucy slept heavily against my chest, safe in my left arm. Our daughter was 46 days old. The room was almost completely dark, except for a couple of silhouettes. A woman knelt beside Nick. I watched quietly from the floor at the feet of his bed. I remember becoming intensely aware of every movement, every gesture, every shift in the room. Time itself seemed to loosen its grip. Every moment felt significant. Every gesture seemed illuminated from within. The boundaries felt thinner, the filters fewer. Reality arrived with unusual immediacy. At that precise moment in the dark, I was not sitting as a practitioner or a teacher, not even as a doula. I was simply a woman holding her newborn while witnessing another human being meet what was coming. Nothing stood between me and what was happening. The woman kneeling beside him offered her hand. Nick lifted it towards his lips and kissed it softly, reverently, as though greeting someone he recognized. "I welcome you," he said. I could barely see them, let alone hear them, but the moment he spoke, I knew. Not intellectually, immediately. He was welcoming what I couldn't see. I reached for his foot and began rubbing it gently with my right hand, while Lucy remained asleep in my left arm. Life in my lap, death at his bedside. And somewhere between them was me, witnessing a moment far larger than I knew. For years, I believed intimacy was primarily relational, something that happened between people. A husband and a wife, a parent and child, a friend and another. Thinking about being beside Nick that night, I have begun suspecting something else. It may be that this is why the moment has remained with me. Because the intimacy that remains most vivid in my memory was not occurring between him and me. It was occurring between him and reality. And I am beginning to suspect that intimacy is not fundamentally about another person at all. Perhaps intimacy is the degree to which nothing stands between us and reality. For a long time, I assumed the deepest fear surrounding death was the unknown. That what frightened us most was uncertainty and the inability to know what happens next. But the more I sit with that contemplation, the more it has begun to feel incomplete. Because standing at the gates of death does something unusual. It removes many of the places we hide. Before the gates, there is still room for negotiation. Miracles may happen and recovery may come. The future remains unwritten. Beyond the gates, mystery begins. But standing at the threshold is different. At the threshold, there is nowhere left to stand except in relationship with reality itself. The gates cannot be unopened. The future that was imagined cannot be restored. The possibility of life continuing as it once was has quietly disappeared. Reality stands before us exactly as it is. Loud, raw, impossibly true. And the question begins to emerge. What does reality ask of us when there is nowhere left to hide? The more I contemplate that night, the less interest I become in death itself. The mystery that continues to hold my attention is participation. What allows a human being to remain in relationship with reality when reality refuses their deepest preference? Nick wanted to live. He loved life. He loved our daughter. He loved me. He loved the future that was being taken from him. His desire to live was immense. And yet, his desire could not conquer death. What moves me now is not that he died. What moves me is how he met what could not be changed. He did not collapse. He did not pretend. He did not abandon himself. He yielded. Not as resignation, not as defeat, as participation. There is a form of courage that receives enormous attention. The courage to win, to overcome, to triumph. But the courage I witnessed that dark night was quieter. A man looking directly at what could not be conquered and remaining himself. Dignity remained, humor remained, presence remained, courage remained, love remained. Months later, I began noticing something that had been invisible while I was inside the experience. Not because I didn't know it, but because I couldn't access it. My husband was dying. Then he was dead. I had a newborn daughter. No clear future. Everything in me was organized around survival. Looking back, I can see that my aperture had narrowed considerably. Most of the field had disappeared. My own experience occupied nearly all of it. What I understood much later was that there was something I wanted from the people around me that they could never actually give. At Nick's bedside, I had accompanied him to the edge, and for months afterwards, others accompanied me to mine. Different thresholds, the same reality. No one could cross for either of us, and yet everyone kept reaching. For years I assumed intimacy meant reducing the distance between people. Now I am less certain. I am beginning to wonder if intimacy is not the disappearance of distance at all. What if intimacy is what remains when two people come as close as humanly possible to one another and discover that a threshold still exists? A place no one can cross for us. A chamber of experience that remains irreducibly our own. Not because love failed, but because consciousness itself is first person. Every relationship eventually reaches a threshold beyond which it cannot accompany us, because experience is lived from within. The beloved reaches the gate. The child reaches the gate. The teacher reaches the gate. The friend reaches the gate. And still there remains a chamber no one enters for us. And yet, despite knowing we cannot become one another, despite knowing we cannot carry each other's experience, despite knowing we cannot cross each other's thresholds, we continue reaching for one another anyway. We sit beside hospital beds, we hold hands, we make soup, we answer late-night phone calls, we remain. Not because we can become the other person, but because we cannot. And so perhaps love is not the elimination of that threshold. Perhaps love is the willingness to remain in contact with another person all the way to its edge. I still do not fully understand what I witnessed that night. Some thresholds can only be known from within. What I know is simpler. I watched a dying man welcome what he could not change. I watched him remain in relationship with reality when reality offered no path backward. And in doing so, he revealed what I am still trying to understand. Intimacy may not be primarily about closeness to another person. It may be the degree to which nothing stands between us and reality. And perhaps the gates of death reveal this so clearly because there is nowhere left to hide. A quiet invitation. Most of us spend our lives trying to create distance from what is difficult, from fear, from grief, from uncertainty, from the realities we would rather not face. Yet, life has a way of bringing us to thresholds we did not choose, moments where familiar certainties fall away, moments where reality asks something of us. If you find yourself standing at such a threshold, you do not need answers before you begin. You do not need certainty. You do not need a particular spiritual framework. Only a willingness to remain in contact with what's already here. If these reflections touch something you have sensed but struggle to name, I invite you into deeper conversation. Not a space designed to eliminate uncertainty, a space designed to increase contact with reality, with yourself, with what remains available when there is nowhere left to hide. With embodied presence, Eagle Snake.